We're going to close the day's conversations with Representative J.M. Lozano and State Representative-elect Mitch Little in conversation with Tribune politics reporter James Barragán, focused on the Republican agenda for the upcoming legislative session. So let's do a little intro here. J.M. Lozano serves as state representative for Texas House District 43. During his tenure, Lozano has been appointed chairman of 5 different committees in the Texas House. Currently chairs the House Committee on Urban Affairs. He sits on Transportation, Redistricting, and Youth Health and Safety Committees. State Representative-elect Mitch Little, Republican of Denton, will be sworn in this January to represent House District 65, a successful business attorney with Sheaf and Stone. Little has fought for private property rights, represented victims of securities fraud, and helped entrepreneurs build companies in numerous industries, including real estate and oil and gas. We introduced James earlier this morning, so we'll get right to the program. So we have a little more time for conversation, and by the way, your Q&A in person and online. But I'll turn it over to James Barragán, politics reporter for the Tribune.
Thanks so much, Matt, and thanks so much to Representatives Lozano and Rep-elect Little. We're excited to have you guys and finish the symposium strong with the party in charge. You guys are in the majority in the legislature, and there's a lot of new faces, which I think means there's going to be potentially a new direction in the House. I think a couple of you guys, or both of you guys, are pretty excited about the new direction that there might be going. So I want to first talk about that, the November elections, the changes that there were, pickups in the House where Republicans already held 86 out of 150 seats, now hold 88 out of 150 seats. There's a big question about who's going to be speaker, and I know that's important, so we'll get to that. But I just want to talk about the pickups because there was a lot of talk about the abortion issue and whether that would come back to haunt you guys, other issues and whether they would come back to haunt you guys. But you guys are, I think, sitting pretty. Picked up 2 seats, looking to make changes. And so we had some of your Democratic colleagues on here earlier, and they said they did not see this, that it would be a mistake for you all to see this as a mandate, to push the legislation that you guys want to push. I think that you guys probably think about it a little bit differently. And so I want to ask you guys if you guys see it as a mandate and what that mandate is. What kind of conservative legislation are you looking to pass? And we'll start with seniority with Representative Lozano.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you. I wouldn't use the word mandate, but I would say that you can quickly learn as an elected official by looking at what happened in the March primaries, where many Republican incumbents, I think 9, lost re-election because they did not support the Republican priorities. And so this next session, I do believe that any member of the Republican Party in the House is going to be very careful about going against what their precinct chairs want, their Republican Party county chairmen want, what their core base supporters want. People are more galvanized today. We're not very far away from the November election where the historic results show that Texas is conservative, and it is beginning to get even more conservative when you look at the amount of turnout among the Hispanic community voting for President Trump at 55% in Texas. All those things combined are telling the Republican House members that you have to follow through with the priorities that they sent you to follow through with. You cannot be wishy-washy anymore, or we're going to replace you.
And I've heard you talk on podcasts about this, but you are a guy who likes to talk about sort of representing your district. And there's been issues where you've talked about representing your district, and now you've talked about the galvanized grassroots and the impact that that's had on you on certain issues. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of what impact that has on you on something that maybe you were a yes, maybe you were a no, and then folks came and talked to you and that changed your mind? Absolutely.
Well, I was 29 years old when I first ran for the House, and I got in when I was 30. And I tell you, when I got in as a Democrat. I ran as a conservative Democrat in that primary. And I came in with a naive spirit, to be honest, believing that there was room for a conservative Democrat in the legislature. So I was voting in my district, and every opportunity that it was a large bill, the certain Democrats would come to my desk and threaten to do robocalls against me. threatened to find an opponent against me. I had the most powerful trial lawyer in the state of Texas call my cell phone on the House floor and threaten me if I didn't change my vote on certain issues. And I quickly realized that there was no room for a conservative Democrat in the state of Texas, okay? Fast forward to backing up real quick. So we come in, that's that first orientation week, and we have a Democratic caucus meeting. And I believe our chair was Jessica Farrar, and I remember meeting Pete Gallego, who was a very nice man. But remember, that election right before 2011, a lot of Democrats lost re-election around me. Solomon Ortiz Jr. lost, Yvonne Gonzalez-Ture lost.
It's like the Tea Party wave
That
in
was
the
the Tea
midterm
Party wave.
of Obama's first term.
And so all the leaders of that Democratic caucus were licking their wounds and all depressed. And no one said anything. And so, fortunately, Jessica Farrar said, "Are there any questions? Anyone want to say anything?" And I raised my hand. And usually you're supposed to sit down and be quiet. But I said, we got to do something. This party needs to change. It needs to be the party of small business because it is not resonating with the Democrat voters that you need to grow the party. And she looked at me, and Pete Gallego was right here. He's looking at me like with laser eyes. And I'm like, okay. But I said my piece. Since then, it's history. Those districts have only gotten more conservative. I switched parties. My district was 51% Republican, and I would win with 61% every single time because people were voting for me and Wendy Davis, or me and Hillary Clinton. It was an odd ballot at the time, but I was asking those voters, give me your vote, and let me show you that I'm gonna vote your conscience and your values. We are not gonna agree on everything, but I am not a racist. Give me the opportunity. And since then, it's only grown and grown and grown. Now, it's easy to mess up a good thing. And so whenever you use the word mandate, our Republican Party cannot get out of control and turn off this growing base that we have right now. We have to be reaching to all segments of the population and trying to find common ground on certain issues. But we cannot water down legislation anymore to the point that our primary voters are going to vote us out of office.
Representative-elect Little, I want to hear from you. I mean, do you think that you do have a mandate, and what does that look like, if so?
Yeah, I haven't been in politics very long, but here's what I understand a mandate to mean. Mandate usually has this pejorative kind of connotation where this means I can bulldoze you now. The voters have spoken, now I can bulldoze everybody else. I don't think that that's really what's going on. I think we as Texans need to recognize what the election said and what it did not say. So we picked up House seats with Don McLaughlin in Uvalde, Denise Villalobos in Corpus Christi, picked up a Senate seat with Adam Hinojosa. These are conservatives, all of whom were targeted along with John Lujan with the women's reproductive rights issue. That did not persuade voters. What seems to have persuaded voters is the idea that we as Texans, as a legislature, and as public officials should make an effort to make life more livable for Texans. We are a group of people who are overgoverned and overtaxed and encumbered by the growth of government. And so the kitchen table issues for voters in Texas overrode the messaging of the Democrats on these issues. People simply wanted relief from what they've been experiencing for the past 2-4 years. And so when you say mandate, do I think it means this is a mandate to roll out the Republican red carpet agenda? No, I don't think it's a mandate to that. I think what we need to do as a Republican Party is respond to the messaging of the voters that they are overgoverned and overtaxed. So I think the November election was not the climax, at least not for me. The primary election was the climax. You saw a huge swath of establishment Republicans who were swept out in favor of grassroots champions like Shelley Luther, Wes Friedel, Katrina Pearson, Andy Hopper. And so people who had really been supported and buoyed by the establishment wing of the Republican Party were cast to the side in favor of people who bubbled up from the grassroots. And do I think the grassroots are going to have their way more within the Republican Party? Yes, I absolutely do. Now, we as Republicans need to unify around those principles to achieve a policy agenda, though.
I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that every single one of those flips that you mentioned are South Texas and Hispanic majority areas, which I know is very important to Representative Lozano.
And I'm not thinking about it in terms of demography. This is a failure of messaging to the people who are doing the voting. And so when you have people like Adam Hinojosa, who's a business owner, Denise Villalobos, people like John Lujan, people who have deep roots in their community who are business owners and intend to address the issues that are really facing Texans: inflation, affordability, outsized government, excess taxing. I think that's why they captured the imagination of the voters in those districts.
You mentioned a little bit about the replacement of what you term establishment Republicans by these grassroots Republicans, which I think you consider yourself one. What type of legislation should we expect? What type of bills are the priority for that new incoming grassroots core?
Well, I know Representative Lozano has ideas, but I think the thing that we need to remember is the people who had victories in the primary as Republicans, they were animated by the GOP's legislative priorities. So you can go to Texas GOP's websites and look at the priorities, and I think those are the priorities that they're going to advance. But I think generally as a larger goal, these people who bubbled up from the grassroots believe our government is outsized. We need regulatory reform. I don't know if you saw Elon Musk's tweet. It was either this morning or last night about the reduction of regulations in the state of Idaho and its effect on the code in that state. We can reform the regulatory practice within Texas and reduce the size of government. We need to be looking for ways to reduce property taxes with a view to ultimately eliminating them, to make life more affordable for Texans. You know, I think the franchise tax, for example, the tax on corporations here in Texas, it collects around $8 billion. We have a $20 billion surplus. We need to enable people who operate small businesses, medium-sized businesses, to do well, to grow their business and empower them.
Would that be a one-time thing, though? Because the franchise tax does pay for some of the infrastructure in the state.
It pays for a little bit of everything, just like everything else in general revenue does. So we need to look at the tax burden on Texans, not only for individuals, but for small businesses too, and look for ways to make life more livable for Texans.
I want to tap in with Representative Lozano. I know you're a small business owner yourself, and I do want to ask you sort of what you see as the priorities, because you've been in the building for 14 years. You've seen a lot. I think you've served under 3 different speakers. So what do you see as the priorities? And you guys are kind of in the same sort of, I think, the reform part of the GOP caucus, right? So you guys want to see a different speaker. You guys want to see changes. But for you, what is the priority? Why do you think there need to be changes? Because there have been conversations about, we have had some of the most conservative sessions in Texas history in the last 2 sessions.
Yes, we have. There are times, however, where bills start out as the most effective way to solve a problem. And then by the time leadership has its way with it, it's pretty much inconsequential. The one example I give on...
It's been watered down.
That's correct. The one example I give on that is being where I'm from, South Texas. I grew up 15 miles from the Border Patrol checkpoint in Brooks County. And I know since I was very little that illegal immigrants were dropped off, could be 1 mile south of that checkpoint, and they trek around and they're told Houston's right over there. And people die in the brush. Little girls with blisters on their feet are left behind. That issue has been going on for decades. And Democrat administrations and even Republican administrations have not allocated the proper resources or effectively prosecuted them, the human smuggler, to the point where they're afraid. They know that they will be out on bond and they will abscond to Mexico and they'll come back and do it again. That has to change. So I had a bill 5 years ago maybe even 6 years ago, that essentially was going to give our law enforcement the ability and our DAs the ability to prosecute these folks. My bill never got a hearing. The bill that was moving was a bill that looked good because it was increasing the punishment for human smuggling, but now it required the DA to prove that there was a pecuniary benefit, that the person was actually paid to smuggle this person. And so in order to do that, you need them to say, yeah, I paid him. And they're not going to do that because, one, they're either gone or they fear for their life or they fear for their family's life in Mexico. So I did an amendment, and I went to that author of the bill early that morning to his office, and he not only told me no, he told me hell no, and he essentially said, this is a Republican. I'm a Republican. He says, go talk to this Democrat. I'm like, why? He basically wrote this bill. You need to talk to him. Well, why would you want to make legislation that the DAs have been telling me and everyone is going to tie their hands on prosecuting human smugglers? Why? Who would do that in Texas? You have to understand that in Texas, there's a criminal defense bar that makes money off defending these human smugglers. And that's where the problem is in public policy. Who are we going to help? Criminals or the innocent? And that's what we have to do this next session on the issue of human trafficking. There's still a lot to do. We are not able to do this ourselves, but I do believe that the federal government needs to definitely secure the border. They need to, I believe, reimburse Texas for what we have been doing to do their job. And so I don't know if that's going to come in the form of a resolution from the legislature. I'm definitely working on one that we would send to Congress to ask for that. And you look at the border, Trump won every border county where I'm from. That is a huge issue. And I really wish our local media would cover it more. There are carjackings, there are murders, there are drug trafficking hits, and they're not reported as such. I have an uncle who was killed in Mexico. He was the Assistant Attorney General of Jalisco. He was going to be the next Attorney General of Jalisco. He was getting death threats. And they put 200 bullets into his face. The governor of Jalisco, the president of Mexico, never even said that it was cartel related. His bulletproof truck had a piece of paper for a windshield. He got that truck because his other truck broke down, and this loaner vehicle did not have a bulletproof windshield. That's when he was hit. That's an inside job. That is a level of corruption that we are dealing with our neighbor to the south. They are not going to stop drug traffickers. They are not. We need to secure our border. And we're going to do it. Texas has been doing it. President Trump's going to do it. But we need to be strong in Texas because the greatest threat we have right now is fentanyl. When I was in junior high, people smoked weed behind the band hall. You weren't going to die from weed. I never smoked it, but everyone knew it was a thing. Fentanyl, the tiniest amount, will kill you. It's so cheap to make. The president of Mexico says Mexico does not produce fentanyl. They get the precursors from China. Mexico makes fentanyl. And so our president needs to put pressure on Mexico to actually stop the flow of fentanyl. These are all things that are federal issues, but they directly affect us because at one point, 50,000 people were dying of fentanyl. Was it per year?
100,000 had died, I think, yeah.
I mean, that's more than Vietnam, the whole Vietnam War. It's insane. And all of that is tied to not having a secure border.
So I'm hearing cutting down on taxes to not encumber business as much. I'm hearing a border. So that's a little bit of taste of what we can expect to see more of next session. I do want to get to the speaker's race because it's a hot topic right now this week. There's obviously an important meeting on Saturday for you all as the GOP caucus where you're supposed to pick an endorsed candidate who should be if everybody follows the rules of the caucus, the speaker, right? I say should be because not everybody follows them. And there's always the possibility that some people break out and they team up with Democrats and they select their own speaker. So I do want to ask about that because I want you guys to explain to the room sort of what the dissatisfaction is. And I think you both are committed to Representative Cook, who has come out as the candidate of the Reform Caucus. What is it about Speaker Phelan's leadership that you all disagree with? And I think we've had a couple of conversations about this, but like I said, from an outside perspective, he has overseen legislation over the last 2 sessions where, permitless carry got passed. That's something that even Speaker Bonn was opposed to, and certainly Speaker Strauss was opposed to that. There's been restrictions on transgender rights. There was the passage of the near total abortion ban. Those are strong conservative pieces of legislation, I think. But explain to us sort of the dissatisfaction with Speaker Phelan, because it's not just, if I understand it correctly, it's not just about the legislation. It's about the way he runs the House.
Yeah, it's certainly about process too. So let me try to address this as an outsider first, someone who hasn't been in the Texas House yet and observes this in a somewhat neutral way. You had mentioned this past session as having been the most conservative session ever. This has been kind of one of the selling points for Speaker Phelan's leadership. I will just tell you, that is not my metric for success or failure of the mission. The mission success or failure is dictated by, in my opinion, a very narrow set of parameters. We have the 8 GOP legislative priorities, just like the Democrat Party has its own legislative priorities. If you take, for example, the border security bill that was killed on a point of order by Dave Phelan's parliamentarian Hugh Brady, these are bills that under a normal environment, Republicans should have been able to pass. And instead, what we have in Texas, rather than simply alignment between leadership, the House Republican caucus, the Senate, and the governor, we have this kind of syncretistic blend of leadership among Republicans plus Democrats, both of whom are really working together against their own party and its legislative priorities. So I want you to understand what I mean when I say this. There are Republicans who are working against Republican legislative priorities, just like there are Democrats who are working against Democrat legislative priorities. What I think the people of Texas want, and certainly one of the reasons that I succeeded in the primary and a number of my other colleagues succeeded in the primary, is they want fidelity to the mission. We want to protect Texas kids. We want to protect sanctity of life. We want to secure our border. We want to keep China from buying real estate in the state of Texas. All of the Republican legislative priorities, which you can all find out at Texas GOP's website, all of them should be advanced. But ultimately, the only reason that they are not is because leadership uses procedure to prevent them from advancing, just like leadership in the House uses procedure to keep Democrats from advancing their bills. So, yes, we have a majority, but we do not govern as a majority. And that is the fundamental problem. If Democrats were in the majority in Texas, I dare suggest that Democrats would expect their House leadership to advance the Democrat Party's legislative priorities. What should not be happening is Republican House leadership should not be working in collusion with Democrats to kill Republican bills, and should not be working in collusion with other outside forces to ensure that the legislative priorities are not advanced. So I think the impeachment is not the disease. If you look back at the impeachment of Ken Paxton, of which I was a part, that itself was not the disease that caused the reshaping of the Republican Party in Texas. It was a symptom of the disease, that the House leadership prioritized the advancement of the impeachment over the other things it should have been doing, like passing the border security bill, and I'm sure a number of JM's bills that he would have liked to have passed too.
And thank you for that important disclosure, Representative-elect Little. You were, of course, part of the legal defense team for Attorney General Paxton, which resulted in his ultimate acquittal in the Senate. Representative Lozano, I want to talk to you as well, because you and I have had some conversations about sort of, and you've corresponded with me via email to some of my stories. But you've talked about sort of the management. Representative-elect Little was talking about the procedure and sort of how bills are slowed down. But you talked about the management, and particularly on impeachment, how the way that was handled sort of cost a lot of, in your view, cost a lot of members their reelection. So I wonder if you can touch on that and also talk about sort of what you see as the problem with the current leadership.
Absolutely. So the two basic phrases which made me, over a year ago, decide not to support the speaker would be poor management and poor leadership. We could go as far as saying it was a type of malpractice in a way. When you have information that, in this case, a kitchen was never remodeled, and you don't disclose that to your House members, and you push them out to impeach a very popular statewide official for bribery, which hinged on a kitchen remodel, and you know that the kitchen wasn't remodeled, tell us. Not telling us is malpractice, it's fraudulent inducement, it's a failure of leadership. It's pushing your soldiers out into an ambush. 9 incumbents lost re-election. Just as recently as the last general election, I had a Republican colleague tell me that he had every person of any level of star power from the Democratic machine in his district block walking against him. And this Republican member told me that he called the speaker's office. He called the speaker. The speaker didn't answer. He called the chief of staff. He answered and said, okay, yeah, you need help? Okay, let me talk to the speaker and I'll call you back. Did not call him back. This is a sitting House member who is in one of the most competitive races in the state of Texas, which the Democrats were just hoping to flip, and they almost did. So he calls this chief of staff back 2 days later and says, hey man, did you get to talk to the speaker? Oh yeah, the speaker doesn't really want to get involved on that right now, but let us know if you have any mail pieces. That kind of attitude. This is in the middle of a very competitive election when you need to help your soldiers the most, give them the tools they need to win. And because he wasn't an enthusiastic supporter of the speaker at that moment, he was being abandoned. That is a failure of leadership. And that was just this past November. It's been going on time and time again. And as a business owner, when you have someone that fails at their job, you fire them. You fire them and you move on. Otherwise, your business is going to suffer.
Fair to say, I've got to point out that the speaker was in his own very contentious primary battle, but your point is understood. He's the leader. He pushes it out, and so I get what you're saying. I want to point out this. You all both, like I said, are in Representative Cook's camp. He's got 48 people publicly endorsing him. He's got to reach that 53 of the 88-member caucus to get the endorsement on Saturday. There's a whole contract with Texas that y'all helped draft up, I think, or signed on to, that has a couple of things on it that you are looking for in the next speaker. Commitment to no Democratic chairs, quicker committee assignments, and a prioritization of GOP legislation. Brad Johnson of the Texan is following, or was following earlier, a meeting of the chiefs of staff of the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker. The speaker's new chief of staff, Mike Toomey, said that they would have committee appointments made, this according to Brad Johnson of the Texan, before the end of January. He also says that he'd like to see rule changes to restrict the use of points of order. This says BA points of order, but that's one of those technical points of order. I see you smiling, Representative Little, because these are some of the things that I think you're looking at. And then he says,
I saw this. Yeah.
Speaker Phelan has agreed to refer 1,000 bills on the first day per Toomey. Does that change your mind at all, or is it too little, too late for you?
Well, here's the thing. JM's holding up the contract with Texas, which I'm proud to say I was in the room where it happened. And I know that
You
JM
signed it before it was cool. You drafted. You helped
correct. I participated in helping to draft it. I saw the same information you did on my way over here about Brad's panel. And I will just say to this crowd, this is the first I've heard of it. And if Dade Phelan is a born-again reformer, we should be hearing it from his mouth, not from Mike Toomey's mouth. Mike Toomey he is universally respected, incredibly experienced in Texas politics. Why is the speaker not advancing these reforms until today? Why wasn't he doing it 9 months ago when we wrote the contract with Texas? I think the writing is on the wall. There will be change in the way the Texas House operates. I think Mike even said that on the panel. Said, forget everything that you know about the Texas House.
He did say that.
But he didn't say forget the leadership. That's the part that remains unfixed. And if we truly believe that mission failure or success is dictated by advancement of our legislative priorities, that is not a failure of process necessarily. It is a failure of leadership and timing to advance those first. One of the items from the contract with Texas that you didn't raise is we want our priorities advanced first. And I think that people of Texas have spoken and said that they demand it. It's one of the reasons that I'm going to be in the Texas House, and we need to comply.
It's almost like a mandate.
I wouldn't say that. What's the word that I command? Yeah.
Representative. So it sounds like Representative like Little. It's a little too late. Too little, too late for you. But Representative Lozano, do you think differently?
I think the same. I'll give you a very funny analogy. I love movies. I love the 80s, especially. And one of my favorite movies is Weekend at Bernie's. And that is
I can't wait to see where this is going.
The speaker, and they're walking him to a party, and hey, Bernie's fine, right, Bernie? And they're moving him. He needs to get rid of those puppet strings, wake up, and do his job. But he has not. How can you not answer your own representative member's call and ask a staff member to call him back? They're members, and that's the thing. The speaker works for the members. He is not a king. She is not a queen. This is a different time, and we're going to change it this time, and it will never go back to the way it was before because the voters are only going to continue to scrutinize that more and more and more. I have to say this, and I've said it in over a year, many podcasts and many interviews. I guarantee that Dade Phelan is not going to be our speaker next session. I guarantee it. David Cook is already, I believe, at 53. There are 47 or 48 public.
48 public.
48 with Spiller. I talked to 3 last night that are going to vote for him, and I'm not done with my list of 15. And they're not on that public list. And there are many more that are just afraid to say something publicly right now. But that first round of balloting on Saturday, when we vote for speaker, they're all secret ballot. They know the problems that Speaker Phelan has caused. We need peace. We cannot be at war with the lieutenant governor. We cannot be killing the governor's legislative priorities. And then he goes after incumbent members in the primary. We need to end the Civil War, bring people together, and move Texas forward.
Can I say one more thing, James?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Nobody really read the fine print on this deal, which is when Mike was speaking on the panel, he didn't say there aren't going to be any more Democrat chairs. There's a very specific reason for that, and I believe the House Democrat caucus is meeting today to decide whether they are going to support Dade Phelan in his speakership. And the House Democrat caucus who has supported Dade Phelan, this is my message to you. What has he delivered to you? What has he delivered to you? Because I promise you, if he hasn't delivered on the Republican legislative priorities, I know he hasn't delivered on the Democrat legislative priorities. So what is the point of all this? If the Republicans are in the majority, they ought to have an opportunity to govern as the majority, and the Democrats ought to have an opportunity to play spoiler however they wish. But what we as Republicans need to do is unify around the principles that we ran on, not to make deals with the other party to try to ensure that no one gets what they want.
I think the main point of their meeting is picking a caucus chair as well, but I don't doubt that maybe they're talking about whether to support Phelan as well. It sounds like, Representative Lozano, you think Cook is going to be the next speaker? And I want to ask the same question to you, Representative-elect Little. You think Representative David Cook has it in the bag?
100%. I understand that there are potentially spoiler candidates out there who have not yet been identified. All I can tell you, James, is we have been working on this for 9 months.
Has anybody called you, or they
Not
know
a-
that you're
not a
solidly
soul.
in Cook's camp?
Not a soul has called me asking for my vote.
Okay. All right. So you've heard it here. These two lawmakers and lawmakers to be think that it's going to be David Cook. We'll find out on Saturday. I do want to move to sort of a couple of the legislative issues that I want to talk about. Border security, Representative Lozano, you were talking about it a little bit, and we've talked about it earlier this morning. But with Trump in the White House, a Republican administration, he's got a Republican Congress, how much money will the state of Texas and the Texas legislature have to spend on border security and immigration this year, given that there will be theoretically an administration in the White House that will want to clamp down on a lot of the activity at the border? Should there be a pullback there, or does there need to be a runway there?
There can't be a pull.
It's a lot of money that could be used, to your point, to lowering taxes, to property taxes, to other things.
There can't be a pullback because there is some lag time in between when the Congress would pass their budget and those programs would be funded, and we cannot go very long without funding our current border surge operations. But in the same process as we are funding those programs, we could be working with our congressional delegation from Texas to put riders in that bill to essentially backfill our expenses at a future date.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, and I certainly do this with humility, knowing that my district is not on the border, but I will say that this is time for us to kind of sow in a famine. And what I mean is, we now have President Trump who's come into office, and it is tempting to say, we'll just let Trump take care of that. Well, the reason we don't have a border security unit today is back in 2016, we just said, well, we'll let Trump deal with that. It wasn't as big of an issue. We need a border security unit. We need to bring back the 287G program and enable our law enforcement officials in Texas to be deputized as part of the immigration system. In my county, in Denton County, we have 120 people who've been arrested who are on an immigration hold. And that number stays about flat. 8 to 10% of the people in our jail are on an immigration hold. And we have no ability to do anything about it without federal support. So I think it's important for us to not rest on federal laurels and understand that this is an ongoing problem, and it should not ebb and flow with national politics. I think it's important for us to invest in our own safety and protection as Texans would.
Thank you, Representative-elect Little. And for those at home, 287G is a program that allows local police authorities to be deputized, as the Representative-elect said, to enforce or help enforce immigration law in the interior of anywhere really, but in your case, in the interior of the country. I want to talk about school choice vouchers. That obviously also was a big point in the primaries, and obviously, the governor feels extremely confident that there will be school choice legislation. We just had a whole panel on public education right before this. Where do you guys think this ends up, and what does that bill look like?
Go ahead, Jane.
Okay. I do believe it's going to pass. I do believe that parents have a right to choose how they want their child to be educated or where they want them to be educated. There are also some things I'd like to see in the bill. For example, I'm not sure if it could be attached to the bill or if it has to be specifically in the budget, but I want it to be contingent somehow, where we change the way our public schools are funded. Right now they're funded based on average daily attendance. And if there's 90% attendance or 88% or 85% attendance, they're not sending teachers home for the day because they don't have a classroom. Every person is still on staff. And so I believe schools should be funded on enrollment. There's also the issue of accountability. I do believe that the STAR test is still something that we need to change. I tried to change it my first session, and the U.S. Department of Education told me that if I eliminated the STAR test, which was my bill was going to do, that we would lose hundreds of millions in federal funding. That's another aspect. If they do away with the U.S. Department of Education, what will that allow Texas to do when it comes to accountability instruments? I took the TEAMS test. If y'all remember what the TEAMS test was, I still have a shirt that says I mastered the TEAMS. It doesn't fit. But I remember that test. It wasn't life or death. I didn't have anxiety from that test. But it told my teachers and my parents if I was at my grade level or not. We need to get back to that basic premise and not be testing our kids to death and testing them into anxiety and mental health issues. The other issue is on the fairness of it. If you're going to take a voucher, you should be having the same accountability instrument as those that are taking tax dollars, because you're also taking tax dollars. And so I do believe there has to be some kind of equity and fairness in that as well. I'd like to work with the governor's office on that and do what we can to make it the best bill it can be.
Thank you. Representative-elect Little, what would you, in your ideal version, what would that bill look like?
I honestly don't know what my ideal version would be. I believe that some form of it will pass. I think it still remains to be seen what the zone of agreement is among the votes for school choice. And when I say the zone of agreement is, what is the total scope of the program from basically the last bill that appeared in the last special session to universal school choice. If you call that a spectrum, I don't know where the zone of agreement is there. There's also a zone of disagreement about the level of testing and requirements that would be on private schools, home schools to comply with the program and receive the funding. I think we as a legislature need to take a holistic approach to education. I believe that school choice is a component. I believe that ensuring that our teachers are well paid is a component. I believe ensuring that our charter schools have money for facilities is a component. There are pieces to this that are all part of a puzzle, and when you isolate them and go, vouchers bad, and say public schools good, vouchers bad, I think you're missing the bigger picture. These are all part of a larger puzzle of education in Texas that we're tasked with resolving. Public schools are important. Charter schools are important. Private schools and homeschoolers are important. We need to make sure that parents are empowered to make the best choice for their student. And honestly, if public schools were solving every problem, we wouldn't need charter schools or private schools or homeschools. There are waiting lists at charter schools. There are waiting lists at private schools. We need to be able to empower parents to make the decision that's best for their child because they know their children.
We're getting close to taking audience questions. My last question, and that is there in the middle, I think for, you guys have been here all day, so you guys know where it is. My last question is about affordability and housing in Texas. There's been an increase in prices of homes, prices of housing. The main way that the legislature has tried to tackle that, I think, is through property taxes in the last few legislative sessions. And I'm just curious for you all if that is still an issue of high concern and what we can expect to see on the cost of housing and or property taxes.
One of the differentiating how there's two types of housing. There's multifamily housing and there's just a single family home. And the legislature has done through several programs it administers, some come from the federal government, to build, there's affordable housing, and then there's apartment developments where the developer agrees to cap the rent, and in return they get some tax benefits from the state and the local governments. On single residents, one of the things that's happening now is the cost, as you know, of everything, materials, rebar, concrete, labor has gone up, and the ability to find skilled labor is very difficult. So then you're having to pay someone 20, 30% more because you don't have enough, and you really need someone to do tape and float or paint, put up sheetrock. And so one of the things that happens is before they even start doing a subdivision in your community, they have to start doing the infrastructure beneath, curb and gutters. And those are very expensive costs that in order for the developer to make money, they factor in that cost into the price of that lot. I believe the state should be somehow creating some kind of program for infrastructure costs where maybe we empower the city to do it, where the city or through their economic development corporations will help minimize the cost that the developer is going to pass on into the price of the lot and thereby into the price of the home.
Thank you for the answer. Representative Little?
Yeah, I've heard a number of really bad ideas about solving this.
From Representative Lozano?
No, not from JM. JM's never had a bad idea in his life. I've heard a number of bad ideas to deal with the housing affordability crisis. One of the ideas I heard was we need to, as a state, create a fund to buy down interest rates for developers and basically hand developers free money to go out and build new developments. It's the same problem as the federal problem. Anytime you introduce artificially government capital in the system, you cause inflation. This is the crisis that we're living now. Federal government has overprinted money. They've inflated our currency. In order to battle inflation, they raise interest rates, and now capital is less available to young people who are trying to buy homes for the first time. But not only that, wait, there's more. Property taxes are outrageously expensive, and we are not currently on a path to eliminating them. And this is something I feel passionately about, is we're using excess cash from the government to buy down the M&O rate for our school system. The problem is, as JM and I bail water out of the front of the boat, local authorities are putting water in the back of the boat. They're borrowing money in the school districts, more bonds, raising the rates, local taxing jurisdictions, the counties, cities are raising rates, and now houses are even less affordable than they were before. We need to be putting Texas on a path to property tax elimination. Maybe one way is through a consumptive tax, some type of increased sales tax, but this cannot continue. And it's not just young people who are experiencing this problem. There are older people in my district in Denton County who are being taxed out of their homes. They cannot stay there. So they need to downsize, they need to move somewhere else where their taxes are lower. This is, in my view, a government taxation crisis. We need to come up with a way to solve the problem. And simply buying down the rate is this endless cycle of government spending money. Essentially, we're laundering the money to the local taxing authorities, which is not a sustainable system in my view. We need a better path to get rid of it.
Thank you. And we talked about two things there. So before we go to questions from the crowd, I do want to ask you. You talked about creating an infrastructure fund. You hit on sales tax. The other way that we've tackled it at the legislature, or that you all have tackled it at the legislature, is through homestead exemptions for property taxes. You know, on both of those things, I think there usually is required constitutional amendments to make these things work. For those things, you do need 2/3 of the vote, and so I think that's one of the things that we have to talk about when you talk about no Democratic chairs, whether the Democrats will continue to play ball on things like this. And I'm sure this is something that they are talking about. And so I guess, is that sort of a concern for you all, that if you don't play ball with them, if they don't feel like they're part of the process, they might not come along with it? Or do you think those concerns will be alleviated? Are we looking to mess around and find out, as the kids say?
Yeah, part of me believes that Democrats want to make houses more affordable for people who live here too. Part of me believes that Democrats pay property taxes and they want to pay less in property tax too. And so my hope is that this issue becomes a bipartisan one where we can work together to solve the problem long term. You know, I heard this expression and cynically believe it's true. There's no money in solving problems. At some point, we have to work together to solve the actual problem here of property taxation in this state and work toward a longer-term solution that doesn't involve us just shoveling the surplus into the problem.
So you think that the appeal to their better angels, that they'll want to play ball on solutions?
I wouldn't put it that way. I just believe that they want to fix it too. Representative
Lozano, is that a concern? You used to be a Democrat, so maybe I shouldn't say that so loud.
No, for 14 months I was. But I'll tell you that I do know my Democrat colleagues very well. And I can tell you that we cannot, as a Republican caucus who advocate and hopefully we won't have Democrat chairs, use that as a way to say that they're going to be shut out, because that cannot be the case. They represent people just like we do. And every vote in Texas is precious. They have to have the ability to do what they can for their constituents through passing legislation as well. So not being a Democrat chair does not mean that you cannot get things done in the Texas legislature. And I do believe that they know that. And we have to appeal to a speaker. We have to support a speaker that will adhere to that. We need unity. We need, to the greatest extent, unity. There's going to be clear disagreements, but it's got to be a respectful session where bridges are rebuilt and fences are mended.
So you think you will all still be able to work together and pass these 2/3 thresholds for important legislation?
That's correct, because as the process goes on, I do believe that they will see that they are getting things done for their constituents, that their voice is important, and that they are having input. It just might not be in the form as a title as a chairman or a chair, but they will see that they are.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I hope everyone understands who's watching this, listening to this, the replacement of the Republican speaker is not a device to abuse Democrats. That is not the intent of what we're trying to accomplish here. What we're trying to do is restore fairness, honor, and honesty, and integrity to the process, and that's what the contract with Texas was designed around.
Let's take questions. Please remember to, we have a little bit less than 10 minutes, so quick question, and also make sure there's a question mark at the end.
So my name is Nancy Mossman, and I want to go back to the taxing concerns that you've raised. My question is, if we eliminate property taxes, then fees and sales taxes are the way that we raise money in Texas. Is that, am I correct in that? Are there other taxation means that I'm in Texas other than property taxes, fees, and sales taxes that I'm unaware of?
Is that the question? Is that the
Yes.
question? So if we eliminate property taxes, is the main way to fund the state government through fees and sales tax?
Some type of increased consumption tax, which is not without its effects too, because we all pay sales tax, and one of the concerns is there going to be a disproportionate effect on certain people who are going out and buying groceries and going to the movies or buying a television for their house?
Usually
Yeah.
lower income people is the concern, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. But another concern or thought that I have is you eliminate property tax. Well, somebody owns an office building isn't paying a whole lot of sales tax. They don't have to. So essentially the burden gets shifted more to people like you and me who are out there buying our everyday things. So I think we need to come up with a solution that makes sense. Perhaps it's a blend of those two things, property tax and sales tax, but we need something that makes more sense than what we're doing now.
We've got 7 minutes, but we'd love to have you back to hear your pitch on what that solution is. Next question.
Yes, my name is Sparkle Williams. Today's Tribune had an article about some proposed anti-adult LGBT trans bills. Specifically, they prohibit adult trans people from receiving gender-affirming care, a revival of the bathroom bill, a slew of other things. Will these be part of the Republican agenda?
I think I heard I haven't seen that article, but if I heard you correctly, that there's legislation, this would target adults. Yeah. Okay. I have not heard of that, to be honest. I do believe I definitely want to read that bill before I comment on it. But with respect to like our contract with Texas and the priorities that we're going to ask for the speaker to put up front of the legislative session, those are not in that.
Representative-elect Little, do you want to chime in?
No, I feel the same way. I think, if you look at the 8 Republican GOP legislative priorities, one of them is protecting Texas children. I think we went a long way toward removing, gender-affirming care from children in this state. I think this is something that we need to continue to advance on and protect our Texas children.
So am I hearing this right, that for you guys, if there are LGBTQ, and particularly trans adults, but they are adults and they should be able to make the healthcare decisions that they think are right? Am I hearing that correctly from you guys?
No, that's not what I said, but I will certainly review the bill and read the article.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
I'm just wondering if that's it's not a priority for you guys.
It's not among the 8 GOP legislative priorities.
Okay.
The first question alluded to this in some part. So the Senate Finance Committee estimated the cost to eliminating property taxes entirely would cost about $80 billion. During the last legislative session, a variety of property tax relief afforded through SB 2 or Prop 4 was sent to the ballot box and subsequently approved by voters. Given that eliminating property tax entirely seems far-fetched in terms of what it would actually cost, what other insight do you have to offer the taxpayers on what the conversations might be this session around further property tax relief?
Yeah. To circle back on it, what was your name? I'm sorry.
Sam Sosa.
Hey, Sam, thank you for your question. To circle back on what I was saying earlier, I don't think we've seen a complete solution to it. I don't know if the $81 billion number is right. It is one that I heard. I read the same, probably read the same article you did from the same committee hearing. It may be that the solution is a blend of these things, an increased sales tax and a reduced property tax. I don't think we've seen the end of the solution yet. And frankly, I can't tell you what the answer is off the top of my head, but what we should all be doing is working in alignment to solve that problem and reduce property tax owners, not only for homeowners, but business owners too. I think the solution, Sam, that we've been advancing of buying down the rate is not sustainable because, for the reasons that I stated earlier, that as you buy down the rates are being raised on the back end of that property tax relief. And I'll just give you an example from my own life and at my home. So I was told we had historic property tax relief. My property tax bill last year went down by 3%, which is not material. If you were on an over 65 exemption, I'm sorry, I've done property tax litigation for the last 20 years, so this is something that's more familiar to me. But if you're on an over 65 valuation, you probably felt more relief because your value was locked. But the appraisal, so you have to, if you want to tackle the property tax problem, you have to control all three levers. You can control the rate buy down, but you're not controlling the values that are assessed by the appraisal district or the rates that are being charged by the local authorities. So it becomes this this application of capital to a problem that you can't solve merely by buying down the rate.
Don't taxing authorities have to go to voters for approval if they go beyond a certain rate? Isn't that the legislation that passed?
In some circumstances, yes. So, if, for example, the school districts, Austin tried to pass a Vader. Other school districts in my district tried to pass a Vader as well. Frisco had one that failed. But the counties are also setting their rate in ways that they don't need to go to the voters. The county commissioners are passing increased rates without having to do that.
And sometimes they do it on the home or on the land, and one is capped, one isn't.
Thank you for the question, Sam. Next question.
Yes, my name is Steve Swanson. I'm a 30-year volunteer in Texas public education. I was compelled to speak hearing about your stories about the need for leadership at the state level. We need leadership in education system at the state level. Drill and kill, school to prison pipeline was in essence spoken to when we talked about how kids are treated in the testing system.
Sir, we've got 2 minutes, so if you could get to the question. Thank you.
Yeah, the question is, the solution to all this is our lawyers choose to honor the Texas Lawyers Creed. Have you heard of the Texas Lawyers Creed, and will you help our lawyers honor it?
Yeah, I don't fully understand the question. I'm a lawyer, so I have to abide by the Texas Lawyers Creed. I'm very familiar with it, about mutual respect and appreciation for the system, but I don't really understand how the Texas Lawyers Creed relates to public education, so maybe you can help me with another 30 seconds.
Okay, it provides lawyers responsibilities to oversee our laws, and we have laws to save the lives of kids. And our governance is not built around following law, it's built around politics. And lawyers themselves, with integrity and ethics as begged by the Lawyers Creed, could be part of the leadership you said was missing.
Oh, well said. Well, I am a lawyer, and I'll be trying to serve you and do exactly that. So, thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Hello, my name's Craig Campbell. I'm with the Austin Retired Teachers Association, and we're concerned on the voucher bills, its impact on TRS. Reducing funds to public schools reduces the amounts that go to retired teachers, and there's 500,000 retired teachers in the state right now. So will you consider that when you're considering vouchers?
Yes, absolutely. And that kind of goes to the issue when I was speaking about the voucher bill. How I'd like to see some things in that bill and work with the governor on that. One of them, in this case, I would just call a hold harmless provision, where it doesn't affect our educators. We need to make education, teaching, a desirable profession again, because we know you don't do it for the money. So whatever benefits there are, at times, that's why people teach, because it's good health insurance. And we need to make everything we can at the legislature to hold our teachers harmless and our retired teachers.
Representative-elect Little, I'll let you finish it off.
Oh, I don't have anything else to add to what James said. I just want to thank you, James, for this panel. Thanks to the Texas Tribune, and thanks to this crowd for just being so kind and generous with your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.